Thank you very much. It's really my great pleasure to give this presentation with Alexandre, who is, I could say, a senior fellow in pathology. And I will introduce the topic, and you will see the past and the present, and for sure, Alexandre will do the future. So you have already seen this figure, and we all recognize that PSVD represent a single entity with various pathological aspects. And for the pathologist, we have two main roles. First, exclude the possibility of a cirrhosis, and then to find so-called non-specific or specific features associated with PSVD. So some features. Among the specific features associated with PSVD, you have the obliterative portal venopathy, so lesions in the portal vein within the portal tract, nodular regenerative hyperplasia, and incomplete septal fibrosis. The non-specific features are both observed in the portal tract and in the lobular area, with the portal tract abnormalities, numerous vessels, dystrophic vessels, dilated vessels, architectural disturbance, also non-zonal sinusoidal dilatation, and mild perisinusoidal fibrosis. But we are not done, and there are several challenges that we met, and at least four. The length of the biopsy, the terminology of the histological features, the specificity of these features, and also the threshold of these features. If we start with the quality of the biopsy and then the length of the biopsy, according to the previous paper and consensus paper, a length of more than 20 millimeters was indicated, which was not strongly based on evidence-based data. And then we, in Beaujon, review a quite great number of virtual biopsy for liver explant compared patients with PSVD and cirrhosis, and we were able to demonstrate that liver biopsy with 15 millimeter length with at least one fragment of 10 millimeter is really very performant to rule out the diagnosis of cirrhosis. So if we move on to the other challenges, this very nice position paper produced by a group of very experienced liver pathologists, they pointed out these different challenges. First, we need a standardized and more specific description, and they propose to use what another very famous group of liver pathologists published in 2019, and then we propose the term that we should, all of them, use to indicate the different elementary features we can see in patients with PSVD. So if we want to deal with the changes of portal vein, we should use only the terminology of portal vein stenosis as example. The other point that has been highlighted is the specificity of the histological signs, and for sure, we know that the specific signs that have been identified are not specific at all. For instance, portal vein stenosis may be observed in many chronic liver disease with extensive fibrosis, most of them. Regenerative nodular hyperplasia can be seen in other contexts, and especially in other vascular liver disease. And the incomplete septal cirrhosis may be a main features in regressive cirrhosis of diverse etiology. And the third, the last challenging issue is the absence of threshold of these histological lesions. If we go back to the literature, we have a quite old paper published by James Crawford that perfectly described what should be a normal portal tract, the number of bile ducts, the number of hepatic artery, and so on, the size between the different structures. And more recently, the group of Isabelle Phil used some morphometric analysis to evaluate the area of the portal tract and also of the dystrophic portal vein in their cohort of patients. But importantly, the initiative of the cost action came very at the perfect time to answer to this challenge. This cost action, 6 working groups, and you can see that the working group was specifically dedicated to histology. The group is led by Christine Saint-Pou, and our objective was for sure, as for imaging, to teach what are the lesions associated with PSVD, but also to better define the elementary lesions and agree on a common and reproducible terminology. And to do that, we have several steps, and the first one was to bring together famous pathologists and really nice pathologists into a group to review a number of cases, and you don't have any hallucination. You can see Pierre-Emmanuel Rotou on the right, who is a famous liver pathologist. And then we will go toward this different step, and I will, Alexandre, present the results of the study.
Thank you very much, Valérie. I'm just adding up the point. So, if we want PSVD to be diagnosed consistently across centers, we need a clear and quantitative thresholds, and for that, even if James Crawford make it before, we choose to start from the ground up, step by step. And so the first step would be to perform morphometric analysis in a normal liver. And so for that, we used some reduced liver grafts that were addressed to the pathology department, so expected to be histologically normal, to be reference, and so we identified like this 10 reduced liver grafts, and from these pieces we had 15 virtual biopsies and 292 portal tracts to be analyzed, so it was quite a work. We measured for each vessel for the small axis, the long axis, and the area, and we made some ratio for each portal tract. And so with this kind of data, we were able to derive what are the thresholds, and especially for incomplete portal vein stenosis, because we lack it for the moment. And so for the longest axis, the portal vein smaller than 2 times the corresponding hepatic artery is considered like an incomplete portal vein stenosis. Or if you want to take the orthogonal axis, it's 1 times the corresponding hepatic artery. So it's just an example, but we were able to give like this some threshold. But even if we have clear definition, it remains a difficult and challenging diagnosis. And so we had to evaluate the reproducibility across readers, and to evaluate this reproducibility in an extensive manner, because in the literature it's often 1 by 1 feature, but not all features together. So we organized a multi-rater review with the goal of measuring the inter-reader agreement, but also to identify which features are really well associated with PSVD. So long story short, but for that we used digitalized slides from Beaujon with 9 pathologies from the cost action, with 2 rounds of reviewing of the biopsies. I will mainly share with you the second round of the biopsy. So 58 biopsies, mainly PSVD patients with portal hypertension. And we had a very huge histological grid with some quantitative, because we want to know how many portal tracts have to be involved with each feature. So we counted each portal tract with each feature, PV stenosis, herniated, and so on. And besides it, some categorical and some qualitative lesions too. And so here is one way to represent it, so we can, in the same time, look at the reproducibility and also the correlation with PSVD. So it's an unsupervised clusterization. Each row is a biopsy or case, and each column is one feature assessed by one rater. So it's unsupervised, and on the extreme right of the chart of the graph, you have the reference diagnosis. So in green is PSVD, and in orange is non-PSVD. And so what you see is that PV stenosis, even without any supervision, they clusterize all together. And so the more the box is red, the more the PV stenosis is higher in this case. And so they clusterize alone, and it's very, very well correlated with the PSVD diagnosis. So it could be like a main feature of PSVD. And the other one on the right of the chart of the graph is NRH and regenerative changes, which were also very much correlated. And on the other end, some so-called non-specific, but this kind of features, so dilated herniated portal vein and abnormal periportal vessel, like previous work, but we show this here too, that it's not very well associated with the diagnosis, and in fact, it's often observed in normal liver. Okay, so now that we've shown that PV stenosis is really highly correlated to PSVD, it separates patients with normal liver from PSVD. We have to give a threshold. That was one of the objectives, and it's a threshold especially for this kind of cohort, because here we compared PSVD and normal liver. So when comparing these two cohorts, the best performing ROC analysis with you see a good area under the curve, 0.9. The best threshold, it means with the best specificity, was more than 25% of portal tracts with PV stenosis. And in this cohort, the specificity was 100%. So it means 1 out of 4 portal tracts with PV stenosis. So finally, after all this work, we wanted to translate this into a practical tool. So we created a comprehensive atlas that describes both qualitative and, when possible, quantitative description of all elementary histological features. So here is the QR code if you want to, and if you don't have time, it's on the next slide and even on the conclusion. So yeah, the next step, because it's not over yet, was to, now that we have an extensive characterization, is to really reduce the number of features and identify what are the major and minor criteria associated with PSVD. And for that, we needed more and more biopsy. So from 40 PSVD, we are now to 88 PSVD cases with portal hypertension. And in the first time, we didn't have chronic liver disease. So now we had chronic liver disease, mainly MACLD, but also alcohol and autoimmune hepatitis. And the other end, the weak of the first part is that we don't have real normal liver, because people with normal liver don't have liver biopsies. So for this step, we, thanks to Michael Dukas and Sarah Dorish from Rotterdam, we have 41 patients with a living donor, so liver biopsy from living donor. So all these biopsies were reviewed by 3 pathologists, so 218, and 6 others from the coast reviewed some batches of 50 biopsies. And so we had a smaller histological grid with semi-quantitative or qualitative issue. So just a few slides about the clinical data. Here are the control cases. So as expected, young adults with normal lab tests. About PSVD cases, a median age of 52 and as expected, low platelet count, splenomegaly, higher spleen stiffness, and all patients with portal hypertension by definition of this cohort. And for chronic liver disease, they kind of represent what we have nowadays. So not many viral infection because they don't need anymore any biopsy. And most of the patients were MASH or MSLD patients with a significant subset of autoimmune hepatitis. And no portal hypertension or really rare portal hypertension in this cohort. So the statistical analysis for this part of the work, elementary lesions were considered present when strictly more than 50% of the reader saw the lesion, so a strict consensus. And we defined a priori the major and minor criteria. So the major criteria were specificity superior to 95% and sensitivity superior to 10%, and minor criteria just is a little bit lower specificity. So here are the three main features that were associated with PSVD. I will describe them a little bit step by step. So NRH, you know, nodular regenerative hyperplasia, with in this cohort 100% specificity. Muscularized portal venule, I will show you just after some pictures, and also a higher frequency because if you remember, I've talked just earlier about a threshold at 25%, but it was in comparison of normal population. And knowing that we have no chronic liver disease in this population, we did also a higher threshold to have like 2 thresholds of portal vein stenosis. So these are the three major criteria that were associated with PSVD, with relatively low sensitivity when taken alone. But if you combine these major criteria, so in a OR manner, meaning having any of the major criteria, you get an higher sensitivity and you keep a very high specificity with a 99% of specificity. So on the left, you have the NRH with the nodular regenerative hyperplasia, this hyperplasia trabeculae in the center. The PV stenosis here with the reduced lumen in the center of the portal tract, and the muscularized portal vein with thickening of the portal vein and smooth cell in the wall. And the second step was to try to catch more patients with PSVD, and for that we excluded the patient with major criteria, and we looked at only the patient who didn't have major criteria to add something to something else for this patient. And well, it's like the major criteria, but in a lower manner. So regenerative changes, it's kind of the incomplete NRH. Abnormal distribution of vascular structure is a consequence often of these regenerative changes, and the PV stenosis, but in less portal tract. So we have kind of high sensitivity, but low specificity, so it corresponds to minor criteria. But interestingly, here, if we use them as an AND manner, so if you have all 3 minor criteria with AND, you end up with a major criteria because the specificity rises up to 98%. So on the left, you have an example of regenerative changes where it's not enough to retain the NRH diagnosis without atrophy on the frontier of the nodule. And the abnormal distribution of vascular structure. And here you have an example where you have several central veins, but no portal tract. And here is like a summary of the results. On the left, you have the control biopsy. On the center, the PSVD biopsy. On the right, CLD biopsy. The gray are the biopsy without PSVD sign. The green with 1 to 2 PSVD sign. Blue, 3 minor signs. And the orange, a major sign. And so the main thing is that major signs are never seen in controls. There is only 15% of PSVD without PSVD signs, and major signs are seen in 3% of chronic liver disease patients. And the final step of this work was thanks to all the pathologists of the nomenclature group, working package 1 and 2, to validate these major and minor criteria. And they were able in a very short time to read 166 biopsies, and they ended up with the same performance with very high sensitivity and specificity for the algorithm of having any major or 3 minor criteria. And just they had just the same kind of performance when we present it like that.
So thank you, Alexandre. So to conclude, I think we have achieved some of our issue, especially demonstrated the length of biopsy to rule out cirrhosis with 15 millimeter long. We have able to identify major and minor signs associated with PSVD, and they were the reproducibility of these signs are very good between the pathologists, and we have provided an histological atlas which is available for the community. For sure, we have still something to do. We have to evaluate and to determine the adequacy of liver biopsy for the positive diagnosis of PSVD. We have also to evaluate the performance of the major and minor signs in a cohort of patients with PSVD but without portal hypertension. But we heard this morning that there is a big VALDI cohort, so it will be done tomorrow. And then we have also, we didn't discuss about pediatric population. We are very concerned of that. We have some connection, and for sure we will have. We need to include now pediatric liver biopsy, and I want to thank you for your attention.
Thank you both for this very nice presentation, also for preparing this awesome histological atlas of this PSVD case. I think that's very, very important.
You could do one for imaging.
Yes. Are there any questions from the audience?
You're not a pathologist anymore.
Not anymore, no. Nor am I a New Yorker. First, that's amazing work, and I'm so happy not to have been a part of it. Where do you put incomplete septal cirrhosis / regressed fibrosis cirrhosis in here? Do you have, is it included in these study sets as an entity, or are you thinking about how to rule it in or rule it out? If you've got, yeah, meaning for me, mostly, if not entirely, regressed cirrhosis or regressed fibrosis.
We didn't look to exclude these cases. So the incomplete septal fibrosis was in the grid to do you think there is or not in the biopsies. So it wasn't reaching any of the predefined major and minor criteria. So that's why it's not included. And for what
and we're happy with that.
I'm happy with that too.
Because what is interesting is that one of the or even the only false positive of the major criteria was in fact an autoimmune hepatitis which were diagnosed as a cirrhosis stage 10 years before, and who have following follow-up biopsy. And we missed all, and all of us said, oh, it's PSVD. So it's still incomplete septal fibrosis. So I think that's why it's not in the final criteria.
Great, thank you.
First, a sociological comment. There is a cluster of liver pathologists on this part of the audience. Please note, a hotspot. High quality liver pathologies there. So congratulations from the audience for this presentation and the work that has been done. The question is, were there any patients with portal vein thrombosis in the group of PSVD? So did you include patients with PSVD in this study? Sorry, PVT.
Portal vein thrombosis 5. It's here.
The answer is 5.
Marginalized portal vein.
Yeah,
but,
it's partial portal vein thrombosis. Yeah. So no patient with complete portal vein thrombosis were included into this study.
Thanks again for this extensive work. So I have a couple of questions. One, so the features that have been shown, they were regarded as being present if more than 50% pathologists scored it as being present, right? But were you able to look at the inter-observer variability among pathologists for each of the features?
So you mean that we have to review again this set of 280?
No, inter-observer.
No, intra.
Intra.
You want the inter or intra? Inter-observer?
Inter-observer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think you would expect it, but the kappa is not one. So first, for portal vein stenosis, it's the one with the most correlation or more agreement. This is data from the first part, where is the 58 biopsy, where we counted each of us the number of portal tracts. So for PV stenosis, it's not kappa, it's intra-class correlation, but it's interpreted in the same way. So here it's versus group. For NRH, the kappa was ranging from 0.9 to 0.6, but in the literature, as you know from Jarap and al. In +1 in 2015, the kappa is around 0.2 for NRH. But the PV stenosis is really the most reproducible feature. And I think in a biopsy we will never reach many more than 0.5, 0.6 maybe, and maybe we should target for it. But I don't know if I have other kappa, but that's the
main feature.
That's the main feature.
Thanks. And one practical question: if we identify, let's say, some minor portal vein features, aberrant portal vein features on the biopsy, we at that time as pathologists may not know whether the patient has portal hypertension or not. We may not know the detailed history, like the case you described, autoimmune hepatitis with known cirrhosis in the past. So what is the recommendation for signing out or labeling these as a diagnosis for liver biopsies? I mean, if you have any combination, whether you have some major or some minor, some combination of the two, all the spectrum can be seen, but we may not have all the detailed clinical information about associated conditions, portal hypertension, and so forth. So is there going to be any recommendation on how to have standardized terminology to describe in pathology diagnosis?
I think we can propose that we have a morphological pictures that is associated with PSVD, because we know that the morphological pattern can be quite heterogeneous and different, and in fact, I think we can report like that. Is that, I'm answering your question?
Yeah, what I meant was that there's been a lot of heterogeneity if you see pathologists, how they report it. So what I was asking was, is there any plan to recommend any standardized terminology so that everybody reports them in a similar way? Right now, there's a lot of heterogeneity in how pathologists might report this.
Maybe we could use in our conclusion, major, minor sign. You know, we can introduce that in our conclusion. So it's a pattern of PSVD with one major sign, and so. And then it will be very helpful for the clinician since they have the scoring system, and then they can put +2 for a minor sign or +3, +5 for a major sign. So maybe it's something we have to do.